The music was thumping, the bass rippling through the air like a living pulse. This wasn't just a party. It was the event of the season, where the city's most powerful gathered, flaunting their wealth like peacocks in full display. Ella, 23, kept her head down, weaving between glittering gowns and sharp suits as she balanced a tray of champagne flutes. She was used to being invisible in places like this. The rich laughed, the servers served, and the divide between them was sharper than ever. But tonight, that line would shatter. Ella's grip tightened as she approached the poolside crowd. Among them was Leo, the king of arrogance, whose sneer had a way of cutting deeper than any knife. She hated working these gigs, but her mother's hospital bills and her brother's school fees didn't pay themselves. As she offered the tray, Leo's voice rang out louder than the music. "Hey everyone, who's up for a laugh?" Without warning, he shoved her. Ella's tray tilted as her feet scrambled to find balance on the slick poolside tiles. Time seemed to slow, the sparkling champagne flutes glinting like falling stars before crashing to the ground. Then came the cold shock of water engulfing her body. She hit the pool with a loud splash, gasping as icy liquid filled her ears and dragged her down. Above her, the world erupted in laughter. Ella surfaced, her hair plastered to her face, her soaked uniform clinging awkwardly to her frame. The crowd gathered at the edge of the pool, their mockery cutting through the cool night air. And there was Leo, standing front and center, his grin as sharp as a blade. "Relax, Cinderella," he jeered, raising his glass in mock celebration. "It's just a little water." Ella's cheeks burned, a mix of humiliation and rage flooding her veins. Every instinct screamed at her to outback, to lash out. But instead, she bit her tongue. This wasn't the first time she'd been humiliated by someone like Leo. It wouldn't be the last. She climbed out of the pool, her soaked shoes squelching as she bent down to pick up the shattered glass. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the effort it took to hold herself together. "Look at her," someone whispered behind her. "Does she even belong here? She should have stayed in the kitchen," another added, their cruel laughter fueling the fire burning inside Ella. She clenched her jaw and kept working, gathering the shards carefully, deliberately. Her dignity, though battered, remained intact. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But then, as she bent to pick up the last piece of glass, the crowd fell silent. A presence cut through the chatter like a blade through silk. Ella didn't look up at first, but she could feel the shift in the air, the weight of someone important. When she finally glanced up, she saw him. Archer, Malcolm, the enigmatic host of the evening, stood at the edge of the crowd. His tailored suit seemed to glimmer under the string lights, and his sharp eyes swept the scene with a cold, assessing gaze. People whispered his name like a reverent prayer, and even the most confident guests seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "What's going on here?" Archer's voice was calm, but there was edge to it, a steel that promised consequences. Leo, caught off guard, attempted a casual laugh. "Oh, just a little fun, Archer, no big deal." Archer's gaze flicked to Ella, who was still on her knees holding the tray of broken glass. "This," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone, "looks like more than just fun." Ella swallowed hard, her throat dry, despite being soaked to the bone. She didn't know what to say, or if she should say anything at all. "Did you fall?" Archer asked, his attention fully on her now. She hesitated, glancing at Leo, whose expression had shifted from smug to nervous. But then she remembered her mother, her brother, and every moment she'd endured for their sake. "No," Ella said, her voice steady. "He pushed me." The silence that followed was deafening. Archer's eyes darkened as he turned back to Leo. "You pushed her?" "It was a joke," Leo stammered, raising his hands defensively. "Everyone thought it was funny, right?" He glanced around for support, but the crowd had turned quiet, their earlier amusement replaced with discomfort. Archer stepped closer, his presence towering over Leo. "Humiliating someone who works hard to make a living is your idea of a joke?" Leo opened his mouth to respond, but Archer cut him off. "You're leaving now." Before Leo could protest, two men in black suits appeared at Archer's signal. They flanked Leo, who sputtered indignantly as they escorted him away. The crowd parted for them, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. As Leo disappeared, Archer turned back to Ella. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone softening. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice wavered slightly. "You don't look fine," Archer said, his sharp eyes scanning her drenched figure. "Come with me." Ella hesitated. "I still have work to do." Archer raised an eyebrow. "I think you've done more than enough tonight." With that, he held out a hand. After a brief pause, Ella took it, letting him guide her away from the pool and the prying eyes of the crowd. As they stepped into the quieter halls of the mansion, Ella couldn't help but wonder. Why was he helping her? What did Archer Malcolm, a man with the world at his feet, see in someone like her? And more importantly, what did he want in return? Ella followed Archer into a private lounge tucked away from the noise of the party. The air was cooler here, quieter, as if the room itself existed in a different world from the chaos outside. Archer closed the door behind him and gestured for her to sit on a plush leather chair near the fireplace. "I don't bite," he said, his tone softer now, almost amused. Ella sat hesitantly, her soaked uniform sticking uncomfortably to her skin. She felt out of place, her wet shoes leaving faint marks on the expensive rug, but Archer didn't seem to notice or care. He poured a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed it to her. She shook her head. "I don't drink." "It's apple juice," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Ella blinked, then accepted the glass with a quiet thank you. As she sipped, Archer settled into the chair opposite her, studying her with an intensity that made her squirm. His sharp blue eyes seemed to see straight through her. "You work hard," he began, leaning forward slightly. "I can see it in the way you carry yourself, the precision, the pride, even when the world around you treats you as if you're invisible." Ella stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Tell me," he continued, his voice low and steady, "what drives you? Why do you endure this?" She hesitated. The warmth of the juice in her hands steadied her nerves, and she finally spoke. "My family," she said, her voice firm. "My mother's sick, and my brother's still in school. Someone has to keep things going, and that someone is me." Archer's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flickering across his face. "Your resilience is remarkable, but let me ask you this. Do you think these sacrifices will lead to the life you want?" Her throat tightened. "It's not about what I want, it's about what my family needs." "And what happens when you burn out?" Archer asked, his tone sharper now, "when there's nothing left of you to give?" His words hit harder than she expected. She looked down, her grip tightening around the glass. "I don't have a choice," she said quietly. "There's always a choice," Archer replied. "Sometimes it's just hidden beneath layers of expectation and fear." Ella glanced up at him, suspicion creeping into her mind. "Why are you telling me this? Why are you even talking to me?" "Because," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you remind me of someone I used to know. A lot like you, actually. Someone who worked themselves to the bone, believing they had to carry the weight of the world alone." "What happened to them?" she asked. Archer's gaze darkened, his jaw tightening slightly. "They broke." Ella's chest tightened at the weight of his words. For a moment, the two sat in silence,
Between hope and doubt, this could change everything, but at what cost? The night had started with humiliation, but now it offered the glimmer of something more, something extraordinary. Ella stared at the folder long after Archer left, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The chatter of the party had faded into the distance, muffled behind the heavy doors of the lounge. Her fingers brushed against the smooth paper, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was some elaborate joke, a test of character designed to see how desperate she really was. But Archer's words echoed in her mind. "Don't let anyone make you feel small. Not Leo, not the world, and definitely not yourself." She closed the folder, clutching it tightly as she stood. She didn't know if she was stepping into a trap or onto a lifeline, but there was one thing she was sure of. She wasn't going to stay in the shadows any longer. When she opened the door and stepped back into the party, the atmosphere hit her like a wave. The music was louder, the laughter forced, and the guests were doing everything they could to erase the uncomfortable memory of what had just happened. but Ella could still feel their stares. She moved with purpose, her wet shoes squelching against the marble floors as she made her way towards the service area. She needed to finish this job, to leave with her head high. But as she passed by the pool again, her gaze caught something, or someone. Leo. He was arguing with one of the security guards near the gate, his face red with frustration. His arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by desperation, as he tried to push his way back into the party. "I'm a guest," Leo barked, his voice sharp and whiny. "Do you even know who I am?" Ella froze, watching the scene unfold. It was almost poetic seeing him squirm like this. For a moment she considered walking past, leaving him to his own devices. But then an idea crept into her mind, one that made her pulse quicken. She approached the scene, her head held high, and before the guards could stop her, she said, "Wait." The guards turned, startled by her sudden interjection. Leo did too, his expression twisting from confusion to fury when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" he sneered. "Shouldn't you be mopping floors or something?" Ella ignored him and addressed the guards instead. "This man assaulted me earlier. He pushed me into the pool while I was working. I think Mr. Malcolm would want to know if you're letting him back in." Leo's face drained of color. "What? That's ridiculous. He's lying." The guards exchanged glances, clearly uncertain. "You can check with Mr. Malcolm yourself," Ella added, her voice calm and measured. "Or you can let him back in and explain why later." The guards nodded and grabbed Leo's arms. "Sorry, sir, you're not welcome here tonight." "Wait!" Leo struggled, his voice cracking with indignation. "You can't just—" But his protests were cut short as the guards escorted him out the gate. Ella watched as he disappeared into the night, his shouts fading into the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ella allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. But her moment of satisfaction didn't last long. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see one of the other servers, Daniel, a friend who had been working alongside her for years. "Ella," he said, his voice low, "what just happened back there?" "Just making sure the trash is taken out," she replied, her tone light but firm. Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he glanced at the folder she was still holding. "What's that?" Ella hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about Archer's offer yet, partly because she didn't know how to explain it. "Just something I need to think about," she said finally. "Be careful," Daniel warned. "People like him don't give handouts without expecting something in return." His words struck a chord of doubt in her heart, but Ella pushed it aside. Archer Malcolm wasn't like Leo, or so she hoped. "I'll be fine," she said, though the weight of her own uncertainty lingered. As the night wore on, Ella finished her shift in silence, her mind replaying the events over and over again. By the time she walked out of the mansion, the skyline glowing in the distance, she felt like she'd lived a lifetime in just a few hours. When she reached the bus stop, she pulled out the folder again, flipping through the pages. The offer was real, the terms were clear, and yet a small voice in her head whispered, "Is it too good to be true?" The bus arrived, and Ella climbed aboard, her wet uniform earning her a few curious glances. She didn't care. As she sat down, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother, Max. "Mom's doing better today. Thanks for everything, Elle. Love you." Her chest tightened. This was why she worked so hard, why she endured people like Leo. But maybe Archer was right. Maybe there was another way. As the bus rolled through the city streets, Ella stared out the window, clutching the folder tightly. Whatever choice she made, she knew one thing for certain. She was done being invisible. She wasn't just going to survive, she was going to rise. As Ella stepped off the bus and walked the quiet streets towards her small apartment, the weight of the decision she had to make grew heavier. The folder seemed to pulse in her hands, a physical reminder of the crossroads she stood at. She'd spent years sacrificing for her family, fighting to keep them afloat. And now, for the first time, there was an offer to make things easier. But was it real? Could she trust someone as powerful as Archer Malcolm? She unlocked the apartment door and slipped inside quietly, not wanting to wake her mother or her younger brother Max. The apartment was modest, the furniture worn but clean, every corner speaking of a family that made do with what they had. Ella peeked into her mother's room. Her mother was asleep, her breathing steady for once, a sign that the new medication might be working. A wave of relief washed over Ella, but it was quickly followed by the familiar ache of worry. How long would it last? How many more bills would pile up? She turned to Max's room, finding him hunched over a desk,
textbooks spread out in front of him. His head jerked up as she walked in. "You're home late," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, the party ran long," Ella replied, setting the folder down on the table. "What's that?" Max asked, eyeing the papers curiously. Ella hesitated. "It's an opportunity, something that could change things for us." Max leaned forward, scanning the documents. His eyes widened as he read the details. "Ella, this is amazing. Are you seriously considering it?" "I don't know," she admitted, sinking into a chair. "What if it's not what it seems? What if I take this chance, and it's just another way for someone to use me?" Max's expression softened. "Elle, you've spent your whole life doing everything for us. Maybe it's time you took a chance for yourself. If this can help you, help all of us,